A very good morning to you. Welcome to the West Ham Voice on Friday morning. I hope you've all had a good week. And we don't have any football to ruin our weekend, have we? West Ham United don't play a game until the 15th of February. That's what, 8, 9 days from now? So the one thing we can be certain of is that the off-field shenanigans will continue to fill our mainstream and social media pages for a good chunk of these 8 or 9 days. There are, of course, the stories of the players that got away during the transfer window, ranging from the elaborate of us attempting to sign Endrick from Real Madrid to the ridiculous of us trying to convince Marko Arnautovic to return to the club. There's also supposed to be a push by Liverpool to make Jared Bowen their number one target to replace Mohamed Salah in the summer. And of course, we've got a replacement for Evan Ferguson, who's yet to kick a ball for West Ham. But apparently, Rasmus Højlund of Man United is our number one target for the summer. So there you go. None of these stories have any shred of authenticity about them. But as I was once told, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. However, there is a story that is potentially newsworthy, and that is the background to Tim Steidten's departure from West Ham United. Now, it was written by two journalists from The Athletic, Roshane Thomas and Guillermo Rai, who, to their credit, don't always go for the sensational. They don't always go for the clickbait stories. They're journalists, of some repute. So in fairness to them, this was quite an interesting read. Now, they claim that they have had access to a number of sources. Some, I believe, might still be working at West Ham, and they were interviewed under anonymity. The sources have revealed a number of things of which most of us were kind of already aware of, and some of things that we had some awareness of, but perhaps now this story has given it a fuller picture. Now, one such revelation is the potential transfer deal that didn't happen twice. At the beginning of the transfer window, the winter transfer window, Tim Steidten received a call from Aston Villa to discuss a potential deal for the one and only Jhon Duran. Now, after how the summer window ended with Steidten not getting the man he wanted, he was kind of surprised to receive a call from Aston Villa to talk about a potential deal in this winter window. However, the call came from a prominent figure at Aston Villa and to say that a deal could indeed be done. However, as the winter transfer window was looming, Steidten was informed by West Ham's hierarchy that the club had to be careful about what transfer business they had to get done because there was a concern about points deductions should we break PSR rules. So in essence, if any signings were to be made, they either had to be loan options or we had to sell players in order to generate funds to buy players. Again, we kind of already knew this, but this has been somewhat confirmed. Now, some argue that we have an abundance of money at West Ham and that PSR is just a smokescreen for Sullivan not to spend any more money. Others argue that we're on the cusp of PSR rule breaking and we have to be careful. Nonetheless, receiving a call from Aston Villa to suggest that Duran was for sale, but knowing at the same time that money was tight, was always going to result in us not really getting this player again at West Ham. However, as we all know, West Ham made a £57 million bid anyway, which was supposed to have been made up of around 42 million pounds over the length of whatever contract was offered, plus around 15 to 17 million pounds in add-ons, which, of course, Aston Villa rejected. Were we about to sell a player in order to get these funds in? That bit remains a bit of a mystery. Now, this potential deal for Duran was to be Tim Steidten's last task at West Ham, and within hours of the transfer window closing on Monday, it was officially confirmed, the secret that we already knew, that Steidten was or had left the club. Now, The Athletic suggests that, according to some anonymous sources who are close to Steidten, he's relieved to be leaving this job after 18 months. In truth, there is only one person I can think of who might be close to Steidten and might still be working at the club, but I don't want to speculate by giving a name out that could be inaccurate. But I'll let you work out who that might be. But why would Tim Steidten be relieved to be leaving West Ham? Well, perhaps the answer to that is to reflect on what has happened over the past 18 months that Steidten had been at the club. Now, Steidten came to West Ham with a strong reputation, of being the pearl finder, someone who could find good players who have either been underutilized at their respective clubs or young players who are on the brink of real breakthrough. But the transfer window he's been involved at, or the transfer windows he's been involved at whilst at West Ham, have shown him to be not to be the kind of pearl finder that we were kind of all hoping for. Disagreements, of course, between the likes of David Moyes, disagreements with Jhon Lopetegui, and the odd duff signings of the likes of Mavropanos and Fulkrug have suggested that there hasn't been a lot of pearl finding going on during Steidten's stay at West Ham. However, his presentation to the West Ham board on his player recruitment achievements when he was at Werder Bremen and Leverkusen won the board over, and he was appointed as a key individual who would reshape West Ham as a football club. Sure, there have been the successes, of course, in signings. The likes of Mohamed Kudus, who was destined to end up at Chelsea. And the one thing that we can all agree on is that Steidten was a good salesman. He could definitely sell West Ham United to a player, which resulted in the arrival of Kudus. Steidten, as well, though, is obviously ambitious and may well have seen West Ham as a good stepping stone into Premier League football to continue building up his reputation. In his interview last year on Sky German TV, he stated quite clearly that he was flattered to have been linked with the Liverpool technical director job when that became available. But that didn't go down too well with the hierarchy at West Ham, and perhaps this was the first sign of cracks between him and the board in terms of trust. Now, that distrust evolved when it was evident that the then manager David Moyes and Tim Steidten were not singing from the same hymn sheet on transfers. And later in that season, that distrust grew when Moyes found out that Steidten had already been courting potential replacements for the Scots job, which resulted in Moyes banning Steidten from being around the players. But the same thing happened when Lopetegui was at the club. Again, issues with summer transfer market, with Steidten, Lopetegui, and David Sullivan all getting involved in player recruitment, with Lopetegui suggesting that it was Steidten's fault that he didn't have the players available to him to do a better job at the club. And then, of course, Steidten again being told to keep his distance from the players when it was evident that he was scouring the market yet again for a potential replacement to Lopetegui. He courted, this source has confirmed, he courted Roger Schmidt as part of that process. But player recruitment was probably ultimately Steidten's downfall. We really did expect to see a seismic shift in the type of players that West Ham would be going for, but that didn't materialize. Now, the source, again, confirmed to The Athletic that Steidten acknowledged that it was his mistake in signing Nicholas Fulkrug, and Steidten was dismissive of the player's well-publicized injury record. But the source also suggested that Steidten believed we had spent too much money on the likes of players like Max Kilman. Other player decisions also seem to be questionable, with again Steidten and Lopetegui being at odds over each other over the loan signing or the loaning out of Naiva Gerd, who left the club right at the last day of the transfer window. But neither Steidten nor Lopetegui thought it was vital to put a recall back in the transfer deal, in the loan deal. So, of course, we now know that we are short of central defenders. And ironically, it was Lopetegui himself who said he would have preferred 4 centre-backs going into the season, yet with a player seemed ideal to his style of play in Knife Gerd, it was the head coach who apparently didn't want the player, and Steidten suggesting that we should have kept him. The source also goes on to say that more clashes followed between Steidten and Lopetegui over the signings of Carlos Soler and Guido Rodriguez, 2 more deals that were eventually done. Lopetegui was eventually sacked, as we know, on January the 8th, having failed to fix West Ham's poor form. Graham Potter, the former Brighton and Chelsea manager, emerged as the preferred option to take over. West Ham's hierarchy interviewed the former Milan manager, Paulo Fonseca, and despite talks, he got the impression that it was Potter who was the intended target overall. And despite Steidten reaching out to Roger Schmidt, the ex-Benfica boss didn't want the job in the first place. Now, with Potter now the front runner and rejecting West Ham's initial offer of a short-term deal till the end of this season, Steidten was further sidelined, with Karen Brady taking over negotiations, and I guess her friendship with Potter seemed to win him over. Not being in a position to negotiate for the club was yet another sort of nail in Steidten's West Ham coffin. No dominance over player recruitment, no some abject transfer failures, and not being involved in negotiations, I guess kind of proved that he was no longer a resource vital to West Ham. And as the source suggests, Steidten is said to be relieved to be leaving the club, but he goes with a bit of a bruised reputation. Now, look, it remains to be seen whether Graham Potter and his new head of recruitment, Carl McCauley, will have any better luck in recruitment of players and the shaping of the team's fortunes. The start is encouraging under Potter, but will David Sullivan give him the freedom to do what's right in the future? The Athletics article doesn't necessarily lay the blame on Steidten for all the things that have gone wrong over the past 18 months, but I don't think we'll hear the last of either Lopetegui or Steidten about their time at West Ham. But what is clear is that there's been a total lack of leadership and direction from the very top at West Ham United. And with David Sullivan still at the helm, the chances of Potter and McCauley succeeding might seem to be slimmer than we think. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're new to this channel and yet to subscribe, please do subscribe to the channel. Please also make sure you hit the like button as you're leaving the video. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll be back very soon.